fearless gamers, and welcome back to another episode of The Joy of Painting Minis. And as you all know, I am Matt the Vet, and we are continuing on with painting our Winged Vampire Lord here from Vampire Count. And so last week, or day, whichever this episode seems to run on, what we did was we painted up the armor here black on both this leg and here, and most of the back there. And we finished up his skin area. That way, got it all highlighted and set. That way, we can move on, and it's done. So, we're going to be continuing on now with the following paints that you see on your screen, and let's dive right in. So, there are a few bits that still need to be painted black here, so I'm going to start with that. So, I'm going to take my black paint, and we're going to just dive right in. Now, one thing that I was thinking of that some of you might be wondering is, why did I just jump straight into all the highlights on his skin and not wait for him to be fully assembled and all that jazz like I did with Cypher? Reasoning for that is very simple. This is a very static pose, and it's very much using the old GW model setup, and they were very two-dimensional. They did, as with this one here, nothing really on him blocks any other part of the model. So I could easily, with the exception of with the exception of his head, since I had to put that on to do that. So I didn't need to wait for the whole model to be painted up and assembled to see where the highlights would be needed, because it was pretty much all pretty self-explanatory. The only other piece that needs to be added on is his leg and his arm, and they have no impact whatsoever as to how the shadows would be cast on his body here. So I was able to get away with just doing it all in one go, instead of with Cypher, where I had to paint one part, then move to a next, then move to a next, and go back and finish an area later on. So that's why I went with that, instead of just doing one base part, then going back and painting over it later. So we're going to continue on here with finishing up all these black parts here, and then we're going to try a new paint that I discovered, which could end up being really, really cool, or really, really bad. We'll find out. Let's see, get into here, paint up his belt. Again, using a fine detail brush here. Gives me the ability to get into these small nooks without risking all the hard work that we did last time. And here, there. So now we're just gonna finish up what needs to be black, which is gonna be these chains. And then his armor on his arm there. Now, when you have something like this, like these little tiny chain links and such, where there's these small little holes, I very strongly recommend really watering down your black paint. That way, it'll pool and get into those, well, not really pool, but flow a little bit better, and get into those really hard, those little tiny nooks. It'll make it easier for getting the paint inside those small little holes than trying to just paint it with without watered down paint. And like I said, so if you so take what you would normally do for your for paint water fight and do just a little bit extra. That'll help get it into those crannies. So essentially what you want to try and do is turn the paint into like a thick wash. That way it's it's thick enough where it will act like paint, but thin enough where it'll flow into the tiny holes like a wash would. So you get like the best of both worlds. Okay. Okay. Now we got that. Just put this in here. And if you can't get it exactly, not too like perfectly filled in, not that big of a deal, because we will be going over the chain and all that in a shade, and that should help catch all the catch any area that our black paint failed to catch. But you just want to try and do as much as possible, because you don't want to fully rely on the shade to do all the work. Okay. So now that we got that, I'm just going to paint actually these horns up here. That way they match the horns. They're going to be popping out of his collar there. Okay, so we are pretty much got this down good. So we are now going to, while we're waiting for this to settle here, and as you can see, like, while we're waiting for that to settle, I'm going to paint the rest of this bat here that I got the black color that I started with, because I want this to be nice and dry for the next stage, which is going to be the metal color. So I'm going to get a slightly bigger brush, because I don't need to be really super clean about this. I'll take the black and finish up this bat here. We'll put him inside. Okay. And I'm just using the leftover paint on my palette. That way I don't have to open up the jar and use more paint than I have to, unless I absolutely need to, which at this point I do, because it's now time to, because now I'm going to go and paint his other wing. And we'll need more paint for that. Okay. I'm going to paint his other wing here. Now this is water, little bit watery, just because I used a little too much water in the brush, but that's okay. Give us a nice smooth coat that we will just simply have to do multiple layers of, which is a much which, from what I've seen, especially with a lot more of the professional painters, that is preferred, is doing thin coats and doing multiple coats rather than one thick coat. Because though a thick coat will get the job done relatively quickly, you will end up with a lot of your detail being lost. And so it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Only have to do one coat, but lose a lot of the detail that you would normally see if you did multiple thinner coats. And also, gives you less brush strokes when you paint with slightly watered down paints. Okay, so I'm gonna put that off to the side there. Okay. So now I'm gonna start with this guy here because this is already finished and dried. Actually, let me just take a quick peek around here. Yep, he's good. And this guy, oops, just a spot. So let me tackle that real quick before we move on. That's another good thing about a white base coat, a white primer over a black primer. Easier to spot some of these miss spots that you wouldn't normally see with the black one. Okay. So then, boom. So now, while that dries out a bit, let us move on to this leg. So I'm going to be using a new style. Well, I don't know how new it is, but it's new. It's new to me. A new thing, and it's a metal medium. And what it does is it takes a regular pigment, and it gives this metallic sheen. Let's see. It specifically says it's transparent, mixed with color, 50%, resulting in a paler metallic shade. And so we are going to do that. We are going to take a green color, and I'm going to take a little bit of this paint medium, put it on my palette, and then I'm going to take my green paint, and I'm going to use a 50-50 mix here to make a metallic color. And I decide with green over, say, the red that games that they have on the website, because this stands out. It's a lot different, and you know, I like to see. I don't think red would look really good, and metal is just a plain metal color is kind of boring. It can get very boring if you ask me. So, and plus, new toy, want to give it a shot. So I figured, why not? It's not like I don't have any major plans to play Vampire count, so don't really gain or lose anything by painting him up some funky colors. So we're going to take this new green metallic mix here. The only downside to this is I am going to have to paint this whole thing in one sitting, because I won't be able to because it'll be very tough to make this metallic coat again. So we're going to have to do this all in one go. Then we will shade it, then mix another batch and use it as a highlight. And so far, I'm liking how it's coming out. You know, it gives it this nice metallic look instead of trying to do like a false metal, which I've read about and I've looked at it. It's a little too intimidating for me. So I'm going to stick with just using plain metallic paints for right now. And maybe down the line, if I get confident in my painting abilities, I'll give it a shot. But that kind of stuff I'll leave to the clown. He's much better at that kind of stuff than I am. So, let's so far. Like I said, really digging how this is looking. Said it's different. It's it gives it this weird, like, essentially otherworldly, like, unnatural look, which I think works very well with Vampire count, because they're supposed to be, like, different. And also, in a way, as I'm just thinking about this kind of has, like, a dragony look to it, and one of the most famous vampires of all time is Dracula, who is from the Order of the Dragon. So, works out very well in that regard. Which, if you haven't, I would give the book a read. It's actually really good, but if you ever did, I would recommend the college edition. Reason for that is the college edition throws in some very interesting facts about the book, the meanings behind different things. Like, there was, like, I didn't know that in Britain at the time when Dracula was written, not having servants was considered a sign of villainy, because it was one of these things where you were up to no good, so you didn't want anyone else in your house to find out what you were doing and risk your plots getting found out. So in a lot of old British novels, villains would tend to be people who had no servants. And there was a whole bunch of other stuff that I learned by it, which is really cool. You got like I said, so I suggest if you haven't read Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and you're curious about it, if you can find one, a college edition, which go to pretty much any college and go to their bookstore, most of them have the college edition. At least that's where I got my copy of it. Now I'm going to leave that wing not this green color. I'm going to make that stick out a little bit. That way we have some different colors going on here, so he's not all just one color piece here. And being that he's a vampire lord, he would have a little decoration in his armor, I think. So we're going to paint that something different. Maybe like a silver or a bronze, or maybe even gold. Or maybe I'll use that and ooh, that's a good idea. We'll see about that. So, okay. We got this leg piece all nice and dolled up here. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Lord himself. So first going to paint the inner of this shoulder pad. Or whatever this piece of armor on knight armor would be called. I don't know if it has a specific name or not. If it does, then feel free to drop a comment. That way I'll learn something. Alrighty. Then paint this up right here. Okay. And then just a little bit more just down here on his other foot here. Alrighty, and actually, one thing I'm gonna talk a little bit about while I wrap this up here is, as of this reading here, I read something very interesting on the gaming sites about this whole, as it seems like everyone's calling it, bubble fantasy, or Bubblehammer, sorry, Bubblehammer, that I think may actually be the real case of it. In case anyone isn't aware, rumor is 9th edition is going to be where there's going to be these little pocket dimensions that are floating around in a warp-like sea. And it's basically the different factions are going to be swimming around in this, like, for lack of a better term, like warp sea, and the pockets of reality will eventually, clash with others and battles ensue, and that's, to explain why Tomb Kings in a far-off land would be fighting Wood Elves, which are nowhere near their continent at all. And someone recently sent to one of the game sites that they were reading the latest book, and he thinks that he's figured out where this rumor spawned from. Supposedly in the next book, there is, I think it was lizardmen are read to have taken chunks of Earth, surround them in these protective energy bubbles, and launch them into the stars to basically get out of dodge of everything that's happening. And this person thinks that what might have happened is someone read this excerpt and decided to go with it and say, yeah, the 9th edition is just going to be, bubbles floating in like a spacey ether thing, and whenever they clash, that's when battles happen. And I think he just went with that. And so I'm starting to think that might be very much what the case is that it's just someone speculating off of some silly fluff piece that he read in the last book, and not actually a concrete rumor. And because it was the first rumor to go off, and I noticed this a lot whenever they make, whenever the first rumor comes out, that tends to be the building block on every rumor a lot of the times. So someone makes up this rumor, oh, there's going to be pocket dimensions. Everyone just builds up whatever rumor they have based off of that, on that one, going, oh, pocket dimensions are true, but this is not, and it just builds and builds and builds. So I am now going to stay optimistic and say that Bubblehammer is not a real thing, and it's just someone taking a silly story from the last End Times book and blowing it up to see if he can get people to believe it. And alrighty. So almost all of him is done. The only thing that's left is the armor, his arm there, and that's about it. So I'm going to take a quick moment here to mix more of the armor color. Sorry about that. I'm, like I said, running low on time, so I didn't want to waste camera time mixing more of the same color here. So we're going to go back and finish this up here. So, yeah, that's the one tricky thing with this is you want to try and get this all done in one go, so you don't have to worry about the paint shades being different. And the only reason we'll be able to get away with it in the next group is because it'll be a highlight, so there won't be any issue with that. And there we go. So he's all done. All that's left to do is his gauntlet, which we will save for the next episode. So, that is all for right now. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, fearless gamers, take care.